So much of political discourse is about scoring political points rather than debating actual policy. A recent kerfuffle is a great example of this. Vice President Kamala Harris has been trotting out a disturbing statistic in several of her recent speeches.
Most Americans are a $400 unexpected expense away from bankruptcy.
Conservatives had a field day with that.
But though that statement, it kind of reveals the entire scheme from the Democrats.
Conservatives used it as accidental proof that Democrats are bad for everyday Americans, and specifically that Biden's economic policies are driving people to financial dependency and collapse. But if we take a step back, we might want to ask a rational question or two. Like, for instance, really? Seriously? Is the average American really only $400 away from bankruptcy? Does that even seem right? Where does this statistic come from? And how reliable is it? It probably won't surprise you to know that politicians got this important statistic wrong and are wielding it around like it's proof of their position. But where does the actual data come from? And does it really suggest that the average American is that financially fragile? This idea of Americans struggling to cover a $400 expense has been making headlines since it first emerged back in 2014. In 2013, the Federal Reserve Bank started the Survey of Household Economics and Decision-Making, SHED for short, because the federal government loves its acronyms. They have been conducting the survey every year since. Perhaps the most famous question in the SHED study tries to understand what people would do if they were faced with a $400 unexpected expense. The actual question says, suppose that you have an emergency expense that costs $400 or $500. Based on your current financial situation, how would you pay for this expense? The survey then gives respondents the following options. Put it on a credit card and pay it off in the next statement or over time. Pull the money from savings, use a loan from a bank or friends or non-bank options, sell something, or just not be able to pay for the expense at all. Ever since 2014, the Fed has used the results from this question to get press coverage for the study. Over the years, it has gotten a lot of press, usually misunderstood press. In fact, when I sat down with the people of the Fed 4 or 5 years ago and mentioned this question, they immediately assumed that I was going to misrepresent it as well. It was actually kind of funny. They started to correct me, but stopped when they actually heard what I said. They were so used to being misunderstood that they kind of glitched and then expressed surprise that I didn't misrepresent the question. What many in the press would say was that Americans can't cover a $400 expense. But the actual report talks about the percentage of Americans who wouldn't be able to cover the $400 expense without borrowing money or selling something. When you realize that borrowing money includes short-term credit card use as well as purposefully using overdraft, you start to understand that the question is as much about cash on hand as it is about financial fragility. It is super important to understand what this question is actually saying, because it says a great deal more about American household finances than the sound bites would suggest. This interesting question gets at a lot of important issues. Each one is complicated enough to require its own video. This says something about Americans' short-term savings rate. It touches on financial support networks among friends and family. It deals with the idea of who has access to short-term liquidity tools like credit cards and what happens when you don't have access to them. It forces us to think about the idea of unexpected expenses and even the idea of short-term versus long-term financial resources. It's too bad that our public discourse leads us to chase the sound bites with the sharpest edges. The world is so much more complicated, and our conversations could be grappling with much more important ideas. There are a lot of issues about American household finances that need to be addressed. The sad thing is, we are unlikely to ever find solutions if we are only looking for rhetorical weapons. Over the last 10 years, more and more American households say they can cover that $400 expense with cash or cash equivalencies. So no, the average American is not a single unexpected expense away from bankruptcy. And no, economic policy has not changed so dramatically in recent years as to undermine American households. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel for more content about personal and household finances.